The NHO Show.
You got that pressure!
Officially episode 2 of the NHO Show with me, Storie.
And myself, Colin.
Woo!
Be here.
Me too. We get to talk hockey. We get to talk a whole bunch of things. You know, it's always great because we get to talk about hockey for a solid half hour before we actually start recording the show. And then we start recording the show and it's way more exciting.
Yeah, because then I actually get my thinking. Not just giving you one-word answers, you know.
Yeah. So, Colin, what do you think of this season? It's great.
Yeah.
All right. What makes it great about it? Everything. It's like talking to a shy 5-year-old sometimes. Not that you are a shy 5-year-old, because you're most definitely not. I promise to everyone listening, the 5 people who listen, that Colin is not 5.
They're 5 dedicated followers.
Yeah, our parents.
Love you guys.
Parents and siblings. Thanks for listening. So it is really exciting because it is the technical, actual second show. Another thing that's really exciting is this hockey season. And I was reflecting about this literally yesterday and just about how 2016-2017 season has been insanity from start to finish. Like, we've had World Cup, rookies breaking expectations and records constantly. We've had blockbuster injuries that have taken out some of the league's greatest players. We've had, everything. 4 coaches, big coaches being fired, trades and weird trades and crazy trades. And it's just like, this has been a nonstop roller coaster of emotion.
I think it kind of started, said, with the trades too, like with the 2 huge trades within like half an hour of each other that kind of got the ball rolling on what was going to be an interesting year. And then knowing that expansion's on its way too is like the elephant in the room when it comes to GMs out there, especially with the trade deadline coming. So it's been a very interesting year in a lot of ways, and a lot of unexpected things have happened. But I feel like there's a lot like things that go on every year, but this year there just seems to be a little bit more drama. And well, like you said, the coaching firings is the most recent big news that's happened.
Yeah, but it's not just, it's such a contrast and a stark contrast from last season, where at this point, I think everyone had all but given up, or essentially given up on hockey. Like, I mean, at least in Canada, and we always talk from the Canadian perspective because we're in Canada, we're, in Ontario and beyond, and, hockey matters to Canadians more is Canada. You equate the 2 things together. So, at this point in the season, every hockey fan in Canada was essentially crying, unless you're a Penguins fan. That's about it.
Crying or just not watching and giving up, like you said, just demoralized.
Yeah, you're just like, this is kind of, I'm just over it. I can't even the Leaf fans who are so used to watching the Leafs lose were like, I just can't watch the Leafs lose anymore. I'm checked out. I don't care. It's bad hockey. And I think that's what it was. It's like last season, it was just bad hockey across the board, for Canadians. And then this season, it's the greatest hockey we've seen in years. And that's not just for the Leafs. It's for every Canadian team. And US
Edmonton,
teams.
obviously.
Edmonton is just on fire. And they're so exciting. And it's like, as a fan of hockey, I find myself like, when there's 2 Canadian teams playing and there's a double Canadian matchup, of course you're going to like, one team over another, but I just don't care. Like, I'm like, if I'm watching a Toronto Edmonton game and Edmonton wins, I'm like, you know what? I'm happy. That's cool. That's great. It was awesome hockey. They played great. I mean, obviously I'm slightly more happy and excited if the Leafs win, But I'm like, it's great hockey. It's amazing. And for hockey fans and for like semi-hockey fans, just reinvigorating that love and that passion for this crazy game and interest. Everyone suddenly now wants to talk hockey all the time, which is great.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a tough year for the Jets again, but every other team...
the Jets. Sorry.
The Canucks were supposed to be, like, worst in the entire league, and they're even, like, not fully out of a playoff spot right now, so...
They had a really rough start to their season. Like, they had a really rough start. But they're doing great. I mean, they're rebounding at least, and they've kind of picked it up.
They're doing a lot better than what people expected, and actually being like a decent team to cheer for this year, and showing some promise for the future. Guys like Bo Horvat's been stepping up lately, so
well, and he was the only Canuck to go to the All-Star game, so that says something. And he was pretty pumped. He was excited to be there and excited to represent his team. In contrast to the fact there were like 3 San Jose Sharks. It's like you're the one whale, killer whale in a sea of sharks.
That's a good one. We need a little drum roll.
Yeah. Don't go away, folks, please. I'm here all night. But
yeah, it's been a good year all around. Like you said, like I think it's what it speaks to too is like a lot of the reason for this is parity in the league. Like the NHL has wanted parity, and that's why the salary cap came in. And I think like every year it's been pretty even, but I can't remember a year like this where it's been this even, like across the board. Like even Tampa Bay, who has had a rough year, and like surprise again, like who was probably one of the Cup favorites heading into the year, aren't in a good spot right now, like third last in the East, but still not completely out of the playoffs. Like they're only like 7 points back, I think. So
it's definitely a tough race. It's a close race, and I think about the players a lot when we get to this point, because kind of the All-Star break is that signaling of, that idea of moving into the second half of the season where a lot of where the drama is going to continue, because now your team is thinking about playoffs, and you're thinking about the trade deadline is coming up. What are we going to do? Are we in a spot where we're going to trade a really valuable player for a more valuable player, so that we have a chance at the playoffs, so that hopefully it will play out and we can win a cup? Like, this is where the drama of everything that happened before the All-Star break is nothing in comparison to the drama that will happen in the next 2.5 months as we gear up for the playoffs. And that race is so tight that I wonder about teams like the Maple Leafs, who went into the start of the season being like, we're not going to make the playoffs. We're going to be really good, but playoffs are 2-3 years away. And every fan, I think, accepted that and was like, yeah, that's cool. We got Austin Matthews, we got Mitch Marner, we got Nylander, that's cool. But now, like, they're in a wild card spot, hanging on. What is that? What are the players thinking at this point? Like, how does that not get into their head of being that close to a dream they thought so impossible and so unlikely they didn't even think about it at the start of the season? And now, when they go into, now that they're in this second half, like, how is Austin Matthews not thinking about the playoffs right now? Or is he thinking about it? And is that going to mess with their heads? Like, that's my fear, is that, they went into the season, like, they're like, we're just going to play our game. We're just going to play hockey. We're going to play our game the way we're going to learn. We're going to get better. We're going to be competitive. But let's not have that stress of the playoffs on our backs from day one. And now you take this really young team of inexperienced players, and like Babcock is, Babcock knows what he's doing. I put my full and complete trust in him. But these are young players. They're inexperienced. They've never been in this position before. How does that idea of the playoffs not mess with your head? And that's
Yeah,
like
well,
my concern is so much. And then, and then what happens, this is me and my anxiety or something like that. Like, what happens if it gets down to that last game and they are like literally neck and neck. And if they don't win, it's a must win, and they don't win. And then there goes that playoff dream. There goes, not only there's a loss, but it's a playoff dream. You build up and build it up and build it up only to fail. And that makes me so nervous. So God, please, Leafs, like for my sanity and everything else, please make the playoffs so that I can go to bed and not worry about you at night.
I think what's important is that you shouldn't be worrying about whether they make the playoffs or not, because in the long run, like, this year won't matter.
No,
sure,
I know.
It'll be nice to get them some playoff experience and blah, 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 but even if that scenario that you just played out happens, like, that's how you learn. You know what I mean? You learn from your mistakes. You learn in moments like that. So if they do end up coming down to the wire, they lose, they'll be better for it in the future. And I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, I'm not worried about it because, like I said, it in the long run this year, it shouldn't affect what they do in the future or like at the trade deadline. The playoffs this year, obviously, it would be a nice surprise, but it's not needed. And like, I think it just comes from the atmosphere in the room. Like, Mike Babcock's a winner. You know what I mean? The players. I think you're way more stressed out than the players are.
It's very true. I probably am far more stressed out than the players are.
They have confidence in themselves. Like, obviously, Matthews and Marner and guys like that have had success at every level they've played at, so they're just used to succeeding, and they have confidence in themselves as players, and they just have the will to be successful. So it all comes from the organizational attitude and the players' attitude. So I think they'll be fine. Like, who knows? I think a lot of it's going to come down to Freddie Anderson, really, how he plays down the stretch, but the second half of the season is always interesting. It always shows like what teams, the good team, who separates the good teams from like the pretenders. You know what I mean? From the contenders.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I'm interested to see how a team like Columbus does down the stretch. They're playing like 500 hockey in their last 10, and they were the big surprise to start the season. Obviously, I think they've played themselves into the playoffs no matter what. But I wouldn't be surprised to see them slip down the standings and like a team like Tampa Bay finally like wake up and say like, okay, we really got to go if we need to make the playoffs. And they're guys that have had success and know when to play under pressure. And I would be surprised to see a lot of jostling in the standings.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's where what the standings are now are not going to be anything close to what they are in a few months when it comes down to the first round.
For sure. It's
gonna be a very interesting first round of the playoffs, and there are definitely some teams that are going to surprise, and some teams that are going to disappoint, and I mean, I think we're going to see a lot of changes between the trade deadline is going to be a little bit nuts. I mean, like, we've already seen so many changes in coaches. In the last 10 days, we've lost like 3 coaches have just poof out of our realm of hockey. It's unprecedented, unheard of. I mean, you do as a coach in any sport, in any professional sport, I think you get into it knowing at some point you're going to get fired or you're going to leave. It's bound to happen. The organization, a new GM is going to come in, you're not going to get along, or something's going to happen where you get forced out. And I think it's probably the only job out there where where getting fired isn't the end of the world, because you get picked up somewhere else or whatever. Yeah. But there's just been some really surprising firings. Like, I cannot wrap my head around the Bruins firing Coach Julien, like Claude Julien. I can't wrap my head around it. I cannot believe it. I can't wrap my head
around a lot of what that's been happening in Boston since Don Sweeney took over. I think him and Cam Neely have their own thing in mind, and it's only getting worse before it gets better. That's for sure.
And that team, like, it's funny because the team on the ice, like the Boston Bruins, are a fairly like non-empathetic team. Like they're out there, they're mean, they're nasty. I mean, slightly less so than maybe a few years ago, but they're brutes. Like they're brutish and they're gigantic. They're big players, and like, you know, every time they play against any other team and I'm watching the game, I am just like sitting there with my hands over my eyes because I just don't want to watch people get taken out in stretchers, essentially.
Well, like Brad Marchand, right? Too.
God, I can't stand him on the ice. I just can't. I'm like, I just can't. And I'm like, you just are this annoying. Except that he's so
team to hate for sure.
Except that he's so great off the ice. Like he's a really nice person. He's like he's funny and he's mild mannered and he's like he's hilarious off the ice. But I'm like, as soon as his skate hits the ice, I'm like, I hate you. I can't stand you. Anyway.
Well, that's a guy you want to have on your team too.
And he is, and that's the thing. Like, and when he's playing for Team Canada, he makes a huge difference, and he's amazing. Anyway, but sort of going back to my point was that, or what the point that I wanted to make was the approach to how the GM and like the press conference that was held after Claude Julien got fired. You know, the GM and like assistant coach, like they were just so like did not care kind of thing. Like they had no empathy towards how sad and how disappointing it was that they just fired the team's longest tenured coach. Like your coach of 10 years, you make this decision to fire, and either you really, really hated the guy or you just have no empathy. And you're like, yep, business as usual, whatever. Which is kind of how I feel like the Bruins are as a team. It's just like, yep, we're big, we're mean, we're tough. We can't show any emotion, and that's it. And then, you know, and then you have Ken Hitchcock being fired, and like Mike Yeo, and you know, and the administration is crying at the press conference. Like they're so upset, and that to me just shows that there's a heart, you know, in St. Louis, and like that team has such a heart and has emotion and wants to and is okay to show their emotion. And then you have the Bruins who are like, no, don't show emotion. Anyway, that was the most, you know, that was one of the more interesting things that I noticed about the stark contrast between the two teams and their approach to their administration and their organization.
The Bruins seem like a pretty unapologetic franchise with like many of their moves, like, and especially like when you do see behind the scenes things like of the Winter Classic, and think they had a TV show called Behind the Bee, like, where they openly talked about the Tyler Seguin trade and like how his partying was a problem and all that. So like they're not shy to make big moves and like bold moves and not really care about them. Like obviously Dougie Hamilton getting traded last year too. But yeah, it was weird timing. Obviously, like you said, they're in the hunt right now, and Claude Julien is definitely like a top 5 coach in the league. So good luck replacing him with someone better.
Well, yeah, and that's it. It's like, who's better? Really? Who's better? Like, who are you going to get that's going to make your team better? Really?
Yeah, like I said, it'll be interesting to see if they wait till summer to address it, or like I don't see why they would though, because if they're that close to the playoffs, like you need to act on that, right? Mm-hmm. But like Gerard Gallant's out there, for example. I don't think
that would be weird.
Yeah, he's more of a player's guy, so maybe that's what they're going for. But I don't know. Mm-hmm. It's a strange move, especially when the news was released, the Super Bowl parade morning and everything. Like, yeah, just comes back to the ownership like wanting to dominate the Boston News and kind of having their own agenda when it comes to things like this. So yeah, it sucks that when the Avalanche were coach hunting and kind of left high and dry that these big names weren't available.
Maybe we'd have a very different Avalanche team.
Yeah. Vegas and teams like that are looking to make changes. Like Calgary's another one. They didn't have very many coaches to choose from in the offseason. So I feel like guys like Bednar and Gulutzin wouldn't have got the chance if if guys like Gallant, Hitchcock, and Julian were on the market. So
right. So now here's an interesting thought. All of these coaches who have been let go in the season and like literally within the month, a month-ish, 2 months, kind of old guys. I mean, no offense to them, but like, I mean, you want to coach with experience, but with the influx of rookies and young blood and the cap space, which brings, the cap, which really forces a lot more young players onto a team. I kind of wonder if maybe this is a signaling of a change in approach to looking for younger coaches who maybe are less experienced, but have a different approach to the game, that some of the older coaches just are so set in their ways that, there's no movement, there's no forward movement. You kind of need change, and you need someone new to come in and bring new ideas. And I feel like, have you ever argued with like one of your grandparents on, something that you're never going to win on because they're just old and that's how they are and they're set in their ways? Like, I just kind of wonder if it's that sort of mentality is like, if you're going to go and hire, maybe you have all these new kids and all of these rookies who train completely differently from how players trained even 10 years ago. Maybe you want a coach who understands a player today better than, who would just be able to kind of relate to a younger player versus a guy in their 60s who is like, 50s, 60s, who just doesn't understand what a player goes through nowadays to get there.
Yeah.
I
think it is an interesting point, because I do think there is kind of a disconnect between like the NHL has always kind of been like an old boys club, and it's like, how much does experience really weigh out over like new and fresh ideas? Like, but it's interesting because, well, and especially when it comes to things like the whole analytics side and what happened in Florida and things like that, like those are new ideas, not really embraced fully by all of the old guard, but has proven to show some success. But that's why Colorado went out and hired a guy like Bednar, like who had success in the minor leagues, gave him a shot. Obviously, it was a tough situation to come into, and there's bigger problems, but he has, like, for a lot of the season, he's shown that he hasn't been able to motivate the players. Like, they just don't care. Mm-hmm. They don't want to win. So I think you have to look on it on a case-by-case basis in a lot of the times, because you could say, like, oh, young coaches like John Cooper in Tampa are really the new era of coaching. But he's having struggles this year. And a guy, again, like Tortorella, who is pure old school guy.
I'm like so old school.
Hard on young players, hard on every player, really. But he's having huge success. So I think you have to look at your team and what they're going to respond to and how you want to build your team, and then hire the coach to fit that mold, sort of thing. So it's really interesting to see, though, like, because there can be success in both ways, but you can't have like a young team. Like, I can't see as much as, like I was saying, I don't want to bring it back to Colorado again, but as much as Claude Julien would be a huge upgrade for them, I don't see him being a fit with all their young players and their direction they're looking to go.
Right.
So
absolutely. Anyway,
yeah,
it'll be an interesting and kind of going back to our point about how the season has been an incredibly exciting one. It'll be exciting to see where the league goes in terms of their organization across the board over the next season and next 2 seasons, I think. All right, well, going back to your point of always taking it back to Colorado, I feel like I always take it back to Toronto, and I try not to as much as possible, because we try to stay neutral and we try to talk about every team and interesting teams. But the fact of the matter is that Toronto is an interesting team. Deals, whatever you want to say to that, you can. Toronto's an interesting team, and the fact that we live in Canada, it's like when Austin Matthews takes a shit it's fucking news. You know, when Nazem Kadri starts an Instagram account for his cat, it's news. It's not news. It's bullshit. Nobody cares, but we do care. So
when they're singing on the bench, you know, it's a big deal.
When they're singing on the bench, but they sing on the bench, Bon Jovi sends them a guitar. Hey, Bon Jovi, I'd love a guitar. Just saying. Throwing it out there. Totally sing your songs all the time. In my room.
You just gotta post them more.
Yeah, apparently I'll just go viral. Okay, so no more talky talk. I'm just gonna sing along to Bon Jovi. Sorry, Colin. This was fun while it lasted. So like I said, so let's talk about that. Let's go into the sound off, and because, you know, my view is that a lot of times Toronto gets called the center of the hockey universe. And again, we always relate it back, you know, this is in Canada. So whether you're in, and it seems to be that, you know, even if you're doing a Vancouver game, and even if you're talking about a Vancouver game, somehow you still relate it back to the Maple Leafs. Somehow Toronto is still in there. I mean, maybe it's because a lot of the broadcasts happen in Toronto. Maybe because the Maple Leafs are a 100-year-old franchise. They've been around for so long. But yeah, so let's sound off on this, Colin.
Sound off.
Sound off, let's do it.
Let's do it. All right, so I'm going to take a minute to talk about my point, then I'll hand it over to Colin, because, you know, ladies first, and obviously the one who's right.
Off. I'm gonna make sure it's just a minute. I'm not going to let you go over this time.
I'm going to make sure that you just talk for a minute. I'm good. Okay, so literally we're starting it in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, Toronto is the center of the hockey universe because of sheer volume of people. You've got, you know, 3 million people in Toronto. That's a very big chunk of Canada's entire population. So on top of the fact that you have a 100-year-old franchise, i.e. the Maple Leafs, that have gone and inspired players across the board to play and people to get into hockey, you just have people playing hockey because there's just that many people. If you took the number of people in Toronto and transplanted them to Vancouver, you'd have a very different conversation because you'd have 3 million people in Vancouver all playing hockey, and then Vancouver would become the center of the hockey universe. So my point is basically like, of course Toronto is the center of the hockey universe just based on sheer volume. And you've got all of English Canada, you know, into the Maple Leafs who are an exciting team, and deal with it. So if you want to get upset by the fact that, you know, everyone talks about Toronto all the time, maybe you just need to jump on board and get with the program, you know? That's it. So, okay, that was a few seconds over.
It's fine.
Minute is a really short amount of time.
Yeah, I was thinking we should extend it. Maybe.
Argue. Okay. Next episode, 2 minutes.
2 minutes, sure.
2 minutes to argue your point, because there were so many more things I could have said to that, and now I feel like I didn't get my point across. Anyway,
I hear ya. I mean, I would argue, yeah, like there will be a center of a hockey universe no matter what city it is, so someone has to be it. I know a lot of Montreal fans, if they're listening, are getting pretty upset about your arguments for Toronto and would argue the same for Montreal, but they do have the whole French thing that kind of isolates some people. But I just think if you constantly talk about the Maple Leafs, sure, like it's what the fans want to hear, and it's what's going to drive clicks and likes and things like that. But you're just ignoring 90% of the other teams. You know what I mean? Like there's superstar players playing in bad markets, and if you just want to be a knowledgeable fan, you can't just ignore all those other teams. That you need to. That's what really makes Toronto like the villain in a lot of ways. Like that's why there's a lot of people that like them and a lot of people that hate them. It's because they have to hear about them all the time. And like in any argument, if you want to like get into hockey debates about people, you have to arm yourself with the most amount of information. And to do that, it's just to pay attention to every team. And so yeah, I guess that's my stance in it. But I know it's never going to stop anytime soon, and it's kind of one of the reasons I'm not a huge Sidney Crosby fan, because like all we have to hear about, like if a guy got 4 goals on another team, you might hear about it on 20-second clip. But if Crosby like broke his stick, like kind of what McDavid, if McDavid broke his stick, got a new stick and scores, it's the biggest news of the night. Whereas like a guy on another team gets a hat trick, and no one cares.
And no one cares. And no one cares. And that's true. And yeah, so maybe we will never. It's a conversation to continue. But and I do agree with you that if you're going to talk hockey, if you're going to make an argument for one team, you need to know everything about every other team. It's entirely how I feel about my approach to football.
There's just not enough time in the day, but I mean, I wish there was. I wish I could watch every game every night and still live a normal life.
And still somehow make money. I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, but that's the dream.
That would be the dream. All right. Anybody looking to, literally pay us to just watch hockey games? We kind of had that a little bit. All right. Okay. So, to be continued, I think, and also sound off to be lengthened.
Yeah. And to your point, like, the fact that Toronto it's good for the league when Toronto is doing well. I will say that much. And it's good for hockey, it's good for NHL. I hope not just being a fan of the Leafs, but even if you're just a fan of hockey, you should be happy that the Leafs are a successful team, because it just makes everything more interesting.
It really does. You know what else is good for the league? Olympics.
Yes.
And
yes, it is. Well, maybe not for the league, but for hockey.
Yeah, you know what else is good for hockey? Olympics. You know what else people like to watch in the Olympics? Hockey. They seem to kind of go together. There's a lot of hockey fans across the board, and that's all over North America right now, are sitting literally in limbo. And if you want to go back to the idea of like, it's news when Austin Matthews takes a shit, it's news when the IOC, the IIHF, the NHL, and the PA all get together to talk about the Olympics. And people are literally hanging on for dear life, or at least I am, when I see that, there's Olympic talk is back on the table. I am sitting there holding my breath, figuratively, because all I want is an answer. I just want an answer. And I'm begging for the answer that we all want, which is that the NHL will support players to go to the Olympics.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see, like, Don Grapes on Coach's Corner, I think it was last week, was talking about this too, and he made the argument, he does think they're going to go, and I think we both agree that they will end up going, just because it's going to be way too messy of a situation otherwise, because we've already had like huge players like Crosby and Ovechkin saying they're going to go no matter what the NHL decides. But things like this is when you do have to take a step back and realize that the NHL is still a business at the end of the day, and it's unfortunate, but they have to make business decisions. And like going to the Olympics and having games at 3 a.m. and taking that much time off your season and putting your players in that kind of injury like potential setting, it's a huge risk for the owners and for the league. So
I think the issue that's being made and the argument that's being made, and this is the argument that's being made kind of is that, we're worried, the owners and the organizations, that they're worried about players' safety. They're worried about that big hit. But it's like, are you really worried about their safety and their well-being? Or are you more worried, or is that just a front for you being more worried about losing some money? And I mean, it kind of leads into it. If your player gets hurt and they can't play in the playoffs, and you've got a playoff team, that leads into it. But I think they're thinking about that 3 weeks where they're not making any money. And that's a long time to not make any money in the NHL. Your season is long, but it's not that long. 3 weeks is a long time. Because the World Cup was 3 weeks, and the NHL it's an NHL event, and that bred a multitude of injuries. but everyone was on board and everyone was willing to do that. And that was preseason.
Because they were getting paid.
Because they were getting paid. And they were totally okay with letting their players play in the World Cup because they were making money. But they're not going to make any money off they're not going to make any direct money off like a game that they would if, during that Olympic time. So it's like, it's just kind of, their whole like, oh, we're worried about players getting hurt. It's like, no, you're just worried about money. And that's, and I get it. It's a business and there's a reason why they're rich and I'm not, because I clearly am terrible at business or just don't have the mind for it. But I just like, it just, like, I'm just kind of sick of sitting in limbo, holding my breath for a fucking answer. Like, I know that there's a lot of things to talk about and a lot of things to sort out, but I'm just kind of over it. Like, I just want an answer. That's it. Yes or no?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's definitely a negotiating tactic that they are, like, not saying much and holding out and stuff. And, because they do want compensation. I think as soon as the IOC says, sure, we'll give you money, they'll say, sure, okay, we'll go. And I do agree that that's probably the biggest issue. But
the thing is, like, the IIHF has said, we'll find you the money. If money is a problem, we'll find it for you. And that's where I just don't, it's like, what is the problem? Really? You said you don't want to give players money. Okay, well, the IIHF has said, okay, here's your money. I'll rob a bank. Literally, they've said, we will find you the money. Give me the money. Show me the money. Whatever Jerry Maguire thing you want to say. Yeah. What's the problem?
I think, the timing of it, like, it's right in the playoff push. And like you said, injuries, obviously, but there's huge news this year about this whole 5-day break that's causing such scheduling issues. And it's just another scheduling headache. Like, the season's going to be so compact, blah, blah, blah. So, like, obviously they have to take that into account and stuff. But I think, like, just bring back my point from before, if they don't end up going, I think it's going to be super messy. Like,
it's going to cause more issues than it's worth.
Suspend players, like, and I think you brought it up earlier, like, about the All-Star game. Like, what's gonna
happen if, like, I guess they don't entirely coincide, but the All-Star game is a bargaining chip. Like, if they could very well, the league could very well, like, do something sneaky, kind of like a John Scott of All-Star of last year situation where they were like, oh, we let fans vote. Fans voted for someone they shouldn't have voted for, so now we're going to send him down to the AHL so he actually can't play, technically, and then we're going to trade him, send him down to the AHL. Oh, and then there was so much fan revolt that they allowed him to play. Like, that was a story. That was amazing. But the NHL did a couple of very shifty things and shady things so that they could maintain the power that they wanted to maintain. And so, like, when you look at what's going to happen with the All-Star game next year, the NHL, if they say, no, we're not going to the Olympics, but we're still going to allow the fan vote for the captains. If Sidney Crosby or Alex Ovechkin gets voted in as a captain, there could be a rule in there that says, there's no way of you getting out of it. And then, which could impact the Olympic participation. And it's like, and then what are you going to do? You're going to fine them? Are you going to suspend them? Like, it gets like, if the NHL says no, it just creates more problems than it's worth. Like, there's no way, but I would just really just like an answer.
Yeah, it's going to be a PR nightmare if they say no. Like, and it would affect probably if they do, like, think about handing out suspensions, it'll probably, like, adjust the owner's view, like, Leonis in Washington, of supporting Ovechkin to go, because if he does go and get suspended, that's not in his best interest. He needs him to play. So, yeah, it'll be really interesting to watch. Hopefully they do have an answer soon. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if they want to get in the Chinese market, like, you need to showcase your players over there.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I sort of, this is like going back to just one more thought on it. It's like, the NHL is such a weird place. And going back to when I was saying, like, in professional sports as a coach, it's probably the only time where getting fired isn't really the end of the world, and you kind of go in expecting you're going to get fired.
Yeah.
Like, like the Olympics, it's like, this is one of those weird situations where if the NHL says, no, you're not going to the Olympics, like, if you were in a regular business and you had this great opportunity to go somewhere for 3 weeks, but come back, but you were like, no, I just want to go for 3 weeks and I want to come back. And your boss was like, no, I'm not going to let you. You would quit.
Can't leave the country.
I'm not going to let you leave the country or whatever. You'd be like, you'd quit. You'd quit and you say, fine, well, fuck it. I'm going to go over there, do this amazing thing that I'm really, really excited for, that I've wanted, that I love doing. And I'm going to come back and find a new job. But you're just not going to do that in the NHL. Sidney Crosby's just not going to do that. Where's he going to go? Like, he's not going to go to Europe. He's too good. Like, he's that good.
Not keep him out of the league too. So yeah,
and you're not going to keep him out of the NHL. So it's like, it's just this really, professional sports have a very different kind of dichotomy where like things that you would do in a regular life and a regular job are not even possible in professional sports. And it's very curious. All right. Well, let's have the final word. Thanks everyone for listening. Final word. We're going to do something fun. Normally we try to kind of leave it on a final thought, but final word. Colin, I have a question for you.
Okay.
If you could have a jersey signed by any player on the New York Islanders, who would it be?
Is this all time?
All time. All time. Pick any New York Islander of all time. Whose jersey would you get?
I'm gonna cheat and I'm gonna do current and all time. Because they might be the same answer, but I want to give a shout out to like some of the old dudes because I'm a big John Tavares fan, so I think that's a pretty easy one.
Yep.
And I actually do like the Islanders jerseys quite a bit.
I do too. I love the colors.
So John Tavares would be in my man cave, and while he's a good candidate for all time, I think just to respect some of the old guard and their old dynasties, I'd go with Mike Bossy, who is probably one of the most underrated players of all time, and probably like the most natural goal scorer of all time.
Wonderful. Good choices.
Or close to, at least.
Good choices.
And, well, I guess I'll ask you the same question.
Okay.
Let's go with their crosstown rivals who are beating my Avalanche right now.
Oh, I apologize. Rangers. All right. And this is okay.
Six.
So this is going to surprise a lot of people because, and I will explain. So if I could have any, I'll do current and all time. All time would be Marty St. Louis, and current would be Lundqvist. Obviously, just current is Lundqvist just because he's incredible.
He's King Henrik,
because he's
right?
the king,
and he's beautiful.
And he's just great to watch, and for so many reasons. And so, but Marty St. Louis. For those listening who don't know actually how short I am 4'11", happily. So Marty St. Louis is a small player, and I adore small players. I think, it's someone I can actually, as a player, I can relate to. Chara, not so much. But so Marty St. Louis, I didn't get into watching hockey until about a decade ago, like religiously watching hockey. So, and when you start watching hockey at an older age, you're not necessarily exposed to all of the teams. You're kind of just watching your team. So you're watching the Maple Leafs. So I was watching the Maple Leafs. And it was and going back to the Olympics and why NHL participation in the Olympics is so important and proven, and I can prove it. During the 2010 Olympics in Vancouver, the Vancouver Olympics, I was Marty St. Louis came in last minute. He was He was an injury replacement.
Yeah, he's a replacement, yeah.
He wasn't supposed to play. It was literally like his last season. Like, he's going to retire. And he came in and he made such an impact on that team, and he was so fun to watch. And I just fell in love with him during the Olympics. And then after the Olympics, he was with the New York Rangers. I started following the New York Rangers, became my second favorite team. And I started religiously following the Rangers because of Marty St. Louis. So I don't remember him at all. I have no recollection of him ever being on Tampa Bay Lightning, even though that's where his banner hangs, and that's where like his number's been retired, and he is a legend there. Marty St. Louis, New York Rangers, because of the Vancouver Olympics, without a doubt. Fell in love with him then, and then started watching the Rangers all the time. And that was even like, it was such a fun year. And I think they made the playoffs, and I was like actually being able to watch playoff hockey and cheer for a team that I cared about. So I would, Marty St. Louis, and he is someone I have never met. One of the players that I would like have a really hard time.
Be starstruck?
I would have a really hard time meeting St. Louis. And like, not because, and he's probably the nicest person in the world, and I know he is, and he's super cool, and he just like hangs out on the east coast of Canada and coaches his kids hockey and like whatever. But
seems like a pretty cool dude, yeah.
And he's little like me.
The underdog in the NHL.
He really is, and but man, he's such a good player. He is so good because, and that's the thing with
funny choice for him. You're right, but a good choice nonetheless.
Yes. Anyway, so that would be therefore, NHL, if you're listening, if you're worried about, if you want another reason to go to the Olympics, hi, right here, talk to me. Marty St. Louis,
Case study.
I would buy. Who else would want to buy a Marty St. Louis New York Rangers jersey? I don't even think you can find them. They probably don't exist. So, so it's like I would very happily, that would be a jersey I would want and I would keep and I would fly with beside my Nylander and my Kadri jersey in the middle.
I will leave people with this thought. If you guys are ever on a, pretty long car ride and want to play a game, I think it's a fun one. My friends and I play. Just go around and talk about who you'd fill your man cave or woman cave with jerseys of each team from all time and current players, and you'll get some interesting answers, I'm sure. Like St. Louis on the Rangers.
Yeah, go through every single team.
Even the Whalers and the Nordiques.
And the Nordiques and the Golden Seals.
Yeah.
There you go. Excited for that movie to come out, by the way, that documentary.
Yeah, that'll be interesting.
That'll be a fun one. Vegas, listen up. White skates. Totally a thing.
Alrighty.
All right, well, thank you everyone for listening. That was a really fun one. Thanks, Colin. Thanks for chatting.
Well, nice chatting with you, Storie.
Yeah. All right. So hang out with us. The NHO Show. I'm Storie.
And I'm Colin, and we will chat again soon.
Amazing.
Okay.